abolitionist approach.
Hello, my name is Liliana Macias. I am one of your presenters. I am an adjunct lecturer for the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies Department. I'm the manager of the Chicago Learning Collaborative at the Chicago History Museum. I am a PhD student in the History Department at UIC, and I'm also a cat mom.
And hello, everyone. My name is Lisette C. Galan. I am the coordinator of student success and social media at your Central Campus. I am currently a graduate student in the Enlace Higher Education Leadership Program and a NEIU alumni in sociology and English. This session, we will focus on abolitionist teachings based on Bell Hook. Bell Hook is an author, feminist, scholar, professor, and activist. We're going to be exploring the ways that we have integrated her teaching to transgress work. Our approach as Classroom Hooks is to signal the centrality of Hooks' work and our approach to showcase how we enact what Hooks calls a community of learners in the classrooms of Northeastern Illinois University.
So the key hooks in Teaching to Transgress, Bell Hooks center Paulo Freire's work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, as well as Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Hanh offers a way of thinking about the approach to education with an emphasis on wholeness, a union of the mind, the body, and the spirit. And so Hooks very much centers her approach, her abolitionist approach in the classroom in this way. And so she reimagines the classrooms with three very specific key hooks or points. So one of the most important one, I mean, they're all important, but one of the key one is a site for students and professors to regard one another as whole human beings. So striving not just for the knowledge in books, but the knowledge about how to live in the world, right? And this is a really important point because it really pushes us to create a community that is aware of how each of the members of this community navigate the world, which is going to be very different. Another important thing that Bell Hooks centers when she reimagines the classroom is she does so as a site of active participation, not as passive consumers. And so really what this boils down to, and Freire does a really good job at framing this, is that he affirms that education can only be liberatory when everyone claims knowledge as a field in which we all labor. And really what that means is that we are recognizing that our students are walking into the classroom with a wealth of knowledge that is just as valid as the knowledge that professors bring into the classroom. And the third one is Hooks imagines a classroom as a site where students and professors understand the abolitionist practice of action and reflection in order to enact change. And so this is really important, right? Because a lot of the times we hear students say, how am I going to apply this in the real world, right? How am I going to use this? How is this useful? And one of the things that we want to do, and that Bell Hooks in particular wants to do, is to show how theory is incredibly liberatory. So one of the ways in which we enact this reimagined classroom at Northeastern is the way in which we approach our work, starting with a culturally responsive syllabi. And so one of the most important points that Bell Hooks makes is actually this quote that says, when we as educators allow our pedagogy to be radically changed by our recognition of a multicultural world, we can give students the education they desire and, most importantly, deserve. We can teach in ways that transform consciousness, creating a climate of free expression that is the essence of a truly liberatory liberal arts education. And so one of the ways in which we do this is by acknowledging that in this multicultural world, there are scholars of every background contributing to the knowledge about different topics, not only just topics that are relevant to their marginalized identities, but overall any topic. And so one of the things that was really important to me when I was conceptualizing the syllabi for this course is looking at the demographics of NEIU. So we know that as of fall of 2018, 32% of our student population is white, 34%, which is actually pretty high compared to most universities, is Latinx, 10% is African American, and 8% is Asian. And so what that told me was that my syllabus needed to be reflective of the student population, because a culturally responsive syllabi centers scholars that are representative of the students, but it also looks at the topics of the course and diversifies scholars. It does not, and this is very important, it does not mean allocating a week to learn about scholars of color, right? And so, for example, we teach Women and Gender Studies 101. And so when we are conceptualizing the syllabi, we should have scholars of color across the entire syllabi, not a week where we only discuss like Black feminist thought, right? Because then that pigeonholes those scholars into just that topic. And what we want to do is to give a truly diverse delve into big major topics through all of these different perspectives. And this is why a culturally responsive syllabi is super important in the class.
In our classroom, we have had the opportunity to lean into media and the arts by integrating the podcast, oral histories. The majority of our class was first year freshmen and a few continuing students. The classroom and education in general can be a place of healing. And this classroom, the Women, Gender, and Sexualities class, is a prime example of that. Some of the topics that we have explored range from identity, community, reproductive justice, body politics, labor, sex workers, and music. So being part of this community that we all participated in created healing for students, and the students were able to engage with the arts because we created, not created, but allowed for students to have reflections without limits, meaning that they were able to engage with research and ideas and through podcasts and study pods, having them more accessible to students, and having the students have autonomy over how they can learn. We do not limit the way that they can reflect, and it just goes to show that education or the way that you learn is everywhere, and the students are taking it into their own personal world and continuing to engage with the material that they learn outside of the classrooms. So while the classrooms can be a place where students can learn, they can also unlearn.
While we were leaning into media and the arts in order to facilitate this community of learners, one of the other things that we definitely wanted to engage in to honor not only the knowledge that our students are bringing into the classroom, but also to allow them to engage with one another's knowledge as well. And so one way that we did this was through peer-to-peer learning. Like many of you, this last semester that we taught was definitely remote and online. And so one of the common concerns that we heard from students is just how isolated they felt at home, right? And so, and also keeping in mind who our student populations are, who was impacted the hardest by COVID, building a community of learners was super important. And in this particular moment in time, it was of utmost necessity. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to build this student-led learning environment through learning pods. And so we had 25 students. We knew we were going to meet virtually. They weren't going to meet in person. And so what we decided is we created pods of 4 to 5 students, and each week the students would get together. They would have classroom times to meet in individual breakout rooms, talk about what they learned, put together a presentation, and then each of the person in the pod, student in the pod, would then present each week. So everybody had to present at least twice in order to gain the points for that activity in the classroom. And so the study pods discussion really allowed the students to lean again on their cultural capital, but it also helped enhance it because throughout the entire semester, they worked with the same 5 to 4 students. And so they became more familiar and more comfortable with one another. And we know that when we're in comfortable and familiar spaces, then we're more likely to share. And it was almost like building micro communities within this larger community. And so it really just allow our students to connect in a more meaningful way to one another. And while that all is super important in this particular last semester, because of everything that's been happening with COVID, it was super, super important, and we needed to react to that. And that's why we made it a point to approach this semester through peer-to-peer learning. And so what this also does is model a community of care through support and encouragement, right? And sometimes it's harder to connect at a larger group, but when we're doing it on a micro level, it facilitates that. And so peer-to-peer learning, particularly this last semester, allowed the students to feel connected, which was super important considering all of the mental health issues that have come out of the isolation of the pandemic.
So in our classroom, we also have a component where we center wellness. So that is where an academic advisor and the faculty member should have a partnership, a collaborative effort to really support the students into success. It's part of the community building component where we support and allow to center the students and their wellness, especially during the remote learning and the isolation that many of us have faced the past 2 years. So by establishing the trust beforehand with the advisor and having that relationship partnership with the instructor, the student is transitioned into a classroom that they already feel welcomed. They know that they're going to be served very well. And even in the classrooms, we have offered classroom check-ins. So acknowledging where you can sense as an instructor, student burnout, and asking them and confirming with them and knowing that they are not engaging as the way that they were. And that is a clear indicator that we need to pause and just re-energize and come back. And the various times that we have offered that opportunity in the classroom, the times that we resumed, the students were able to bring in more. And then also bringing in other departments of the university, really utilizing all of the services available. Students may feel very exhausted from just their classroom, so they're not going to seek out external resources, whereas we can bring them in. So throughout the semester in the spring, we brought in El Centro staff to talk about the success workshops during the spring semester that were open to all students and really centered academic success, tips, habits that they can take on. In addition, El Centro staff shared other student resources like the career development, student counseling, health services, and really making sure that the students were introduced to the staff and they can have a point of contact, and even reaching out for scholarship opportunities, acknowledging that a vital component of the resources is just knowing how to continue to well prepare for the future and to continue to be able to be successful on their journey at NEIU.
And so one of the ways that we can best measure if Liz and I are being successful in the classroom is going to the source, it turns out. And so we in particular pay very close attention to our student surveys, because student surveys is what allows us to know where we need to adjust, refresh, maybe change things, maybe something worked, maybe something didn't, because the abolitionist classroom always takes a chance to be innovative, and some things are going to go fantastic, some things are not going to go so well, and you just, if you all have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach us at the following emails. Again, my name is Liliana.
And my name is Lisette, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.